Jordan and Gretzky, Serena and Ruth. Remembering great ones is easy to do. But what about the no-names who spent their whole lives long snapping footballs and catching sack flies? They're guys, remember that guy. Remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy. They're just gonna remember some guys now.
It's Hester trying to work it back to the middle. Gets past the first wave, and here he goes. It's Hester inside the 30. Hester's going to take it all the way for Remember That Guy, the show where we mine our memories for nuggets of nostalgia about peripheral players past and present. Hey there, folks. It's me, one of your hosts, James, and I'm here with another guy ready to kick things off in spectacular fashion.
Well, you don't want to kick it off to Devin Hester. I mean, that's just right there, number one. We're smart enough. We come from the church of John Harbaugh. We know special teams. Diaz back with you once again. You don't want to kick it to Devin Hester, but we do want to kick it to our very special guest. You can absolutely trust him to not run 100 yards down the field. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, it's me, Rex Grossman.
Yo, do you remember the Rex Grossman? Do you remember that meme being a thing? This was maybe, 4chan, obviously you had B, which is where all the, crazy stuff was.
Yeah.
But there was also SP, and SP's favorite athlete of all time is Rex Grossman, who is like an MS Paint version of Rex Grossman. Like, you know how we had fuck it, Odell's down there somewhere? Rex Grossman is the true root of all of that. You'd have your green text post Rex Grossman drops back, sees 10 out of 10 cutie pie in the first row. Fuck it, I'm going to show her how strong my arm is. Guns it 200 yards directly through her head. She dies on impact. Rex turns back to the sideline. Fuck yeah, still got it.
Why are so many Bears players memes?
Chicago's funny. Second city.
They're a memeable franchise, memeable city.
Rather than Rex Grossman, a fictional athlete, I'm sure there are some real athletes that are making memories for us. One incredibly bite-sized one. You guys know how Russell Brand, because some really shitty allegations came out, has just fully pivoted to a Jesus freak right-wing grifter.
I heard about the Jesus freak stuff. I saw him baptize someone in his underwear, but I have no idea about anything else around this man.
So Russell Brand is selling you an amulet for $299.99 that will protect you from Wi-Fi. And one of the celebrity endorsements is from Toronto Maple Leafs John Tavares. John Tavares is endorsing a $300 amulet to protect you from Wi-Fi, and we'll just leave it at that this week, guys. I want to talk about busting nuts.
I didn't think this was that kind of show. Okay.
One of our favorite pastimes.
If I say the word conkers, what does that mean to you?
Conker's
Bad Fur Day?
That was what I expected the two of you would say. So I've brought up some very stupid sports here, and I brought up some very stupid controversies, and I'm proud to bring you today what is the climax of both of those. Conkers is a children's game, originally. It's a children's game that's been played since the early 1800s. And since 1848 in Britain, it has been played with horse chestnuts or conkers. That is just what they call both the tree and what we know as buckeyes, like with Ohio. It is a children's game where these conkers are cored through the middle, just like a little hole big enough to put some kind of string through that you can anchor on the other side. And then you just take turns with these strung up conkers whacking at each other's to see who breaks the other person's conker first.
So you're trying to break other people's nuts.
You're trying to bust other people's nuts, yes.
Rochambeau, essentially, is what we're talking about here.
Yes, a less but not painful version of Rochambeau. Since 1965, the height of competition has been the World Conker Championships, or WCC, and sometimes it is a difficult thing to put on because of climate change and early frost sometimes in years past. So they have to get over 2,000 conkers for this, for competitive balance that the contestants are then able to select. When they choose, you're pulling them just blind out of a bag. Now, I mentioned that there is a controversy about this. If one were to cheat in conkers, the way to do it is to doctor your conker. There are a couple different ways you can do this. If you just let it get old, it gets harder. You can also bake them. You can paint them with a varnish or nail polish to give them a little bit of a surface. You can soak them in vinegar. That is actually something that a guy in 1991 got busted for in the WCC. Michael Palin from Monty Python's Flying Circus. This year, if you look at the World Conquer Championships, at first blush, there's a real nice feel-good story. On the women's side, I will say, there's no controversy. We have the first ever U.S.-born champ in either the men or women's sides, a woman from Indianapolis named Kelsey Banchbach. On the men's side, we had an 82-year-old named Dave Jenkins who won for his first time, and he's been competing since 1977. So we put decades and decades into this. Jenkins' finals opponent, Alistair Johnson Ferguson, after their match, complained that his conquer was basically disintegrated, in his own words, in one hit. And so he immediately cried foul, said something's got to be up. Jenkins was found to, in his pocket, have a steel chestnut, like a metal chestnut in there. He swears he didn't use that. I'm going to go ahead and say I believe him on that because I don't think you could get away with just pulling a metal conquer out of your pocket, whacking it, and then by the time everyone's looking, having it back away. But the thing about Jenkins, his nickname is King Conquer because despite never winning, for years now, he's been one of the tournament's highest judges, one of the guys who is kicking off the tournament every year. He's become kind of a cultural mascot of it. And also, he is one of the guys responsible for coring and stringing the roughly 2,000 conquers that contestants choose from. What people are implying is that if you did indeed cheat, he likely would have had some way with the stringing and coring of it to select the best conquers and put some kind of mark in the string to know what to pull from. Found this like the day after it happened because of some weird MSN push notification on my work computer. Most happy I've ever been about that. So you can find the story elsewhere. But I am an obsessive nerd, and you come here for me to take the extra step, which I have done. Because I dug a little bit further than just what all these stories are saying. And it turns out 2 years ago, we had a similar instance of a longtime participant, this time someone named Fee Aylmore, who'd been competing since she was 17 and was now 49, but she won for the first time ever back in 2022. However, when Fee Aylmore won, immediately people cried foul because her dad, one of the tournament's highest judges, is none other than Dave Jenkins. Now, he was found not guilty of doing anything that time. That is stood. That result is still what you find if you go to the Wikipedia page for the World Conquer Championships. But I have not seen anyone pointing out the fact that, like, Dave Jenkins, who is now under investigation, I don't know what the governing body is.
They're going to hire you to investigate at this point. You've put in more effort than anybody else.
It's just important for us to note, this is his second instance of being accused of impropriety at the highest level in just the last 3 years. And so don't let Dave Jenkins off the hook if you hear about this and be like, oh, what a cute 82-year-old man finally winning a Conquer championship. I think there is some smoke here. I don't know if there's necessarily any fire. We'll have to wait and see, but this is the bonkers Conquers controversy that I wanted to share with the two of you today.
For the listeners, James just morphed into Brian Windhorst during that hole. Now, why would that person have been involved again? A brilliant expose. Not quite an expose, more of a, hey, look into this. You're like the original whistleblower of Deep Throat here. All this nut busting.
The thing I do feel obliged to mention now is, like, in 2022, this happened right after butt buzzing, and so all the articles about Fee Aylmore's, everyone is cracking jokes the whole time that no one cheated with any devices inserted into themselves. And I did have a horrible flashback like, oh God, I'm going to be talking about this story for the next 6 months, aren't I? But that's not what we're going to talk about for the rest of the episode. I need to hear some more memories from the two of y'all.
So last weekend was kind of a nice full circle moment for me because I was able to do a boxing event in Philadelphia. It's very rare that I get to work in Philadelphia, which is just, very nice. But what made it a full circle moment was that we were doing the broadcast for Danny Garcia's new promotion. For the unaware, Danny Swift Garcia, on his way out as a boxer, he might have 1 or 2 more fights, but a Philadelphia native, Puerto Rican heritage. He's a 4-time world champion in 2 different weight classes. One of the best boxers to come out of Philadelphia recently. Now doing what a lot of the smart boxers do when they realize, hey, I can keep getting into these fights or I can become a promoter. And it was an honor to do his promotions fight. But I do need to say, I hope that going forward, they will get some more recognizable sponsors because the title sponsor for this specific card of the promotion, I'm going to say it and you're going to think that I'm joking, but it is called Vagina Water.
Go on.
Okay.
Vagina water, and of course their website, vaginawater.com.
How the fuck did someone making a product in the year 2024 get a hold of that URL?
It seems like it's something that should have been taken up long ago, right? It doesn't seem quite possible. But the thing is, at my first hearing this, I was first like, oh, that's a funny joke. Oh, no, wait, that's actually the sponsor. And, your first inclination is like, okay, like female hygienic product. There's a certain pH that is probably ideal. This water is perfect for that. Maybe that's what it is. It's literally just a 12-ounce like water that, you drink. They say that it comes from, apparently, like the base of the root of the stem of a flower is also called a vagina. Sure. Their advertising leads into that. There's a video on the website if you go to it, which is, it's your most basic, here's this guy and he's at his job and he's a construction worker and it's sad. And then he gets vagina water and now all the ladies want to party with him and now he's in a limo and they're all drinking vagina water together. It's one thing for me to say it. It's another for you to go to the website and just take this in for yourself. And like, you can form your own conclusions about what kind of business it is. If you remember the Sixers Color Star Technologies, the Color Star website was very similar to this website. I'm going to leave it at that. But it was a very... We made enough jokes, I guess, is what I'll say, on the crew. We had plenty of jokes to make. There were a lot of jokes that were made. But, hey, dumber things have gotten popular in this country. Vagina water could take over. I would sooner have one than a Dasani. I'll say that right now.
We're talking about it.
Name recognition. And no, we are not sponsored by vaginawater.com.
We're not saying no, vaginawater.com. Yeah, we're not turning it down.
No, we could be the official podcast of Vagina Water. Anyway, the whole point of this is working for Danny Garcia was truly a pleasure, but we'll see if Vagina Water remains the title sponsor of the cards going forward.
Bustin' nuts and vagina water so far. Xavier, the bar's been set high for what 2-word term you'll use to refer to your memory?
Boss Nation.
Oh, God.
Okay, so Boston has a new NWSL team coming. Boston used to have a professional women's soccer team called the Boston Breakers that folded, and they just got an expansion. This expansion was announced back in November of 2023. So they've had an entire year to come up with a name and marketing and everything. It went possibly the worst that any unveiling of a name could go. The name of this new club is Boss, B-O-S, Nation FC. And they got this from an anagram of Bostonian, the word used to refer to people from Boston, which is also a much better name if you just leave it as
Bostonian FC, yeah.
Yes, Bostonian or Bostonians FC would have been a much better name. But the name isn't the only issue that has come out of this launch. Their launch was a hype video called Too Many Balls. As part of this hype video, they were selling t-shirts with the phrase "too many balls" on it, and essentially took the whole video to say balls suck, like the entendre of showing other like men's sports, but then just men in general, and then saying the only ball you need is this, showing a soccer ball. It was immediately condemned as transphobic by the only openly trans athlete in the NWSL, Quinn. As people may expect, women's sports have a very long history of inclusivity, especially women's soccer, which is a very LGBT-friendly space. And people hated, one, the transphobic nature of it, but also the, no, men suck, get out, when they've been trying to have a very inclusive fan base. It was immediately deleted. They put out an apology and deleted the URL of toomanyballs.com. And
we're like, how were you able to get that in 2024?
Essentially, everybody hates this team now before it's even started and wants them all to fail. And it's the worst way you could ever introduce a team to a league. There's a very good article by Meg Linehan on The Athletic that I would recommend people read about it. But Yeah, fuck you, Boss Nation. NWSL says they're down to 5 cities for a new team, and Philly's one of them, so I hope when Philly gets it, they kick your ass. There are a couple other quick things. Have either of you heard of Peyton Houston?
Don't think so.
Peyton Houston is a Louisiana high school quarterback. And last week, he threw for 817 yards in a single game.
Not bad.
Is the most ever in a single high school game according to the National Federation of State High School Associations, the NFHS. There is apparently a national record that's still held by Will Greer for like a non-sanctioned high school sport, but this was the most ever. And they lost 77-76 because their defense couldn't stop anybody. But Peyton Houston does have the record for most yards in a sanctioned high school football game, which is wild.
That's amazing. You know what that reminds me of? That reminds me how Tom Brady has the record for most passing yards in a Super Bowl, and he lost to the Eagles. That was pretty cool.
You know what else is cool? There was an article in The Athletic called How the NBA Preseason is One of the Last Bastions of Freedom in Pro Ball. I didn't know this until reading this article. There is no standardized NBA preseason. It is up to the teams to figure it out themselves. And they have to come to agreements with other teams if they want to play. There's technically you could have no preseason if you can't get anyone to agree to play with you. Because of that, you have some teams that will try to figure out what other teams are having training camp in the same spot. The Golden State Warriors wanted to have a training camp in Hawaii, and they had to get another team to agree to have a training camp in Hawaii so they could play a preseason game in Hawaii. The Sixers had a game scheduled with the New Zealand Breakers as a late addition. But because they're not an NBA team, that had to be approved by the NBA first, and so it took a month for the NBA to finalize contracts so they could play that game.
Not only that, the New Zealand Breakers are actively in their season right now. So they literally flew 30 hours to Philadelphia to get their ass kicked and lose by 50 and then fly back. I think they actually might have played one other game.
So the Breakers played the Jazz and the Thunder, and the Sixers called them late after they'd already scheduled it to try to get an extra game in. It's so funny. I love that it's just kind of a game of, hey, do you guys want to play? No? All right, we'll find someone else. Hey, you guys want to play? Okay, cool. We'll meet here in San Antonio on the 3rd of October. And that just makes me very happy that it's so decentralized like that. What doesn't make me happy, did you see what happened with Nigeria in the AFCON?
Oh, yeah, they got diverted and shit.
So, Nigeria was supposed to play Libya in AFCON qualifying. While they were literally descending to the airport in Benghazi, they were diverted to apparently an abandoned airport and refused food, water, and locked in the airport, saying they were not allowed to leave and enter the country. This is from the captain of Nigeria, William Troost Ekong. 12 hours in an abandoned airport in Libya after our plane was diverted while descending. The Libyan government rescinded our approved landing in Benghazi for no reason. They have locked the airport gates and left us without phone connection, food, or drink, all to play mind games. I've experienced stuff before playing away in Africa, but this is disgraceful behavior. Even the Tunisian pilot, who thankfully managed to navigate the last-minute change to an airport not fit for our plane to land, had never seen something like this before. Upon arrival, he tried to find a nearby airport to rest with his crew and was denied at every hotel under government instruction. He could sleep there, but no Nigerian crew members were allowed. They have returned to now sleep on the plane, which is parked up. This game did not go on as scheduled. Libya did not say that they didn't do this on purpose. Instead, what they said is, well, we were treated badly by Nigeria last week when we flew to play against you in Nigeria. The information that we have about that is they were flying to Nigeria, while in the air, decided to fly to a different airport, not an abandoned airport, just a different airport. Nigerian officials had to scramble last minute to meet them there. And then they argued that their buses to the game were not sufficiently air conditioned. But the Libyan government had booked those buses. None of it had to do with the Nigerian government whatsoever. So the Libyan players were mad at actions taken by the Libyan Federation, and then the Libyan government decided to essentially take the Nigerian team hostage as revenge for nothing. As of now, we do not know what's going to happen with this game. There's questions on whether Libya will get a win by forfeit, in which case this could be incentivized for other countries, or if Nigeria will get a win by forfeit, or if they'll just do it some other day. But it is absolutely wild that we have a situation like this in 2024 where, professional athletes are essentially being locked in an abandoned airport in order to keep them from beating you in a game of soccer. Also, Sabrina Ionescu's a dog.
Yeah, that was nuts. She's it's her moment. She specializes and she thrives when it's crunch time.
I was just going to say it's been 3 good games because, again, I don't want us to say anything that we would regret later on this podcast.
I'm not going to regret saying she's a dog. She's still a dog.
She is a dog. She's a dog one way or the other, and it's been 3 very good games. And these are very good memories being made for us right now. But it's time for us to go a little bit further back than the memories being made now and for us to remember some guys. The guys that we're going to remember today, I was thinking about the skills of athletes, skills that are far beyond our own in any capacity whatsoever. But then every once in a while, you get the guys in sports whose skills are beyond even their peers to such an extreme extent that they are elevated to a different level amongst those peers. One example to pull real quick, a late 19th century baseball player who was so good at stealing bases that he was referred to as Sliding Billy. Sliding Billy had 100 or more stolen bases for 3 straight years from 1889 to 1891, 324 in that 3-year span of his 914 career stolen bases, which is still to this day 3rd all time. He leads the league all 3 of those years. He parlays all of that and his base running into 418 runs, which leads the majors during that span. This dude is incredible because he has this elite skill. What Sliding Billy also has, though, are some other very good skills. He's got a career .455 on base percentage. He's actually, Diaz, still to this day, the Phillies franchise leader in batting average, on base percentage, and stolen bases.
That's pretty depressing.
Well, 2 of them are right stats. The other one, is pretty sad. This is an elite skill that Sliding Billy has. But because he's pairing it with these others, that's the kind of career that one elite skill can produce when paired with others. It can make you a ball player who averages more than a run per game and eventually reaches the Hall of Fame, as Sliding Billy did in 1961. I am interested, though, this week in the guys who have that one elite skill and nothing else. So we're going to talk about guys who are only good at one thing. And the reason that I bring up Sliding Billy is he is not the only Major League Baseball player with his real name. More than a century later, a second speedster is going to reach the majors to ask the question, what if you were only good at stealing bases? And the name that these 2 players share is Billy Hamilton.
Okay.
Herbert Lee Washington came
Herbert
from the
Lee
track.
Washington ran, so these guys could also run.
Exactly. There we go. I wasn't going to find a good one to use 2 different words, but that's honestly the best way to approach it.
That's the link of the Billy's Hamilton, but we are going to zero in on the Billy Hamilton that we all 3 seem to have some familiarity with. Billy Hamilton the Younger hails from this tiny town in Mississippi called Taylorsville, less than 2,000 people. Very, very small. So you would imagine that it is a little easier to stand out in town, but that it might be a little harder to catch on outside. Despite this, Billy Hamilton is so good at all sports at Taylorsville High. He is all-state in 3 sports, baseball, football, and basketball. He's good enough at football that, as a wide receiver, he's almost recruited to Ryan Howard's alma mater, Diaz, Mississippi State. But that all changes when his baseball skills are enough for the Cincinnati Reds in the 2nd round of the 2009 draft to take a flyer on him as a shortstop prospect. He gets to the minors that first year in 2009, spends 43 games with the Gulf Coast League, and then the next year in 2010 with the Billings Mustangs in Montana, he has 69 games, nice. But given his later reputation, might be a little surprising to find out he only has 62 stolen bases in 74 attempts during the 112 games that these first 2 seasons represent. The thing is, it turns out, I found, Billy Hamilton, throughout his life, he hasn't really tried to be a base stealer because he doesn't even think he's that fast. Apparently, there's something in the water in Taylorsville, or there's something in all of the Mountain Dew that Billy Hamilton and his friends drink. He says that he is fueled by Mountain Dew. Whatever it is, he said everyone in Taylorsville is as fast as he is. And so he never tried to have a base stealing game because he was not the kind of guy that needed to steal bases on his rosters. But that's going to change in 2011. He is promoted to A-ball this year, the Dayton Dragons. And the Dragons have a brand new manager, Delino DeShields, a guy we might be familiar with, and also a pretty prolific base stealer in his time. He becomes the impetus for Billy Hamilton, a kind of middling prospect, to become capital B, capital H, Billy Hamilton. In 135 games with the Dragons that year, Billy Hamilton steals 103 bases in 123 attempts. He is just the 12th ever minor leaguer at that point with 100 plus bases, and he is the first in over a decade. Breaks the Reds organization record of 98. And to top it all off, this landmark game where he ties it helps Dayton tie their single season win record with 82, which they then break the next year. So not only is Billy Hamilton demonstrating this one skill, it is helping the team win, but this still doesn't really move the needle yet for opinion on Billy Hamilton at a national level. He's only moving up a couple spots in prospect lists after this incredible season. And he still spends that entire season in A-ball with Dayton, never moves up. The next year, they do move him up to high A. He's going to play with the Bakersfield Blaze. He's no longer with his mentor, DeShields, but the change in his game that DeShields imparted has stuck. Billy Hamilton is going to become a true base-stealing savant now. 82 games with Bakersfield. He's already topped his 2011 total, 104 in 125 attempts. But he only plays 82 games because then he moves on up to Double-A with the Pensacola Blue Wahoos, where he does slow down a little bit by his standards. He only adds another 51 in 50 games. But if you're doing your math, that means between high A and Double-A, Billy Hamilton has 155, crushes the minor league record for most in a season, the record that was held by a dude named Vince Coleman for 30 years at this point, by a full 10. And it's 155 at an 81% success rate, which is pretty phenomenal. And maybe the best part of this season, I want to mention, in his full season between the Blue Wahoos and the Blaze, he has a 420 on-base percentage. Nice. Goes to the Arizona Fall League this year, and at this point, there's a couple prospects coming up the Reds organization at shortstop. If you're a major league organization, a lot of the people you're drafting are going to come in as shortstops initially. And they've got Didi Gregorius, they've got Zach Cosart waiting in the wings. They like them at short better. So this is when Billy Hamilton moves to center field to take advantage of the range that this speed gives him. Now going into 2013, finally he's going to start getting some hype. He goes up from 48 to 20 in Baseball America's prospect rankings, 34 to 11 in the Major League Baseball rankings, and from 22 to 14 for Baseball Prospectus. So finally, we're getting some respect for Billy Hamilton as he starts his season in AAA with the Louisville Bats. Just keeps on swiping, slows down, again, relative to his standards, but 75 stolen bases in 123 games at, again, about an 80% rate. Still excellent. And that is good enough for him to get a spot in his second straight MLB Futures game, and it is good enough for him to get a spot on the expanded September rosters for the Major League team that season. Unsurprisingly, in his first couple of appearances, he is a pinch runner, gets a steal in that very first appearance, all-time defensive catcher Yadier Molina, so not a cheap steal for his first steal. He does eventually come around to score, and that's kind of the story of those first few appearances that he has in 2013. He is mostly a pinch runner, occasionally coming into the field, racks up 5 stolen bases and 4 runs before he even gets his first ever start on September 18th. And then when he finally gets a start, goes 3 for 4 with a double, 2 walks, 4 stolen bases, and 4 runs. Just showing the kind of promise that a September call-up is meant to impart. Just this one tiny little game, this one tiny little taste, and now you get to spend the whole offseason dreaming about what a full year of Billy Hamilton could look like. In the offseason, I spent some time with our friends down in the Puerto Rican League, Cangrejeros de Santurce, so just an obligatory Puerto Rico mention. And then entering 2014, he is set on opening day to start as the everyday center fielder. This season of promise starts with an 0-for-4 golden sombrero with 4 strikeouts on opening day, and he doesn't even get a hit until a week into the season, doesn't steal a base until 2 days after that. And even by the end of April, when he salvaged his average a little bit, getting it above the Mendoza line, he has already been caught 5 times in 16 attempts, which, by Billy Hamilton standards, absolutely atrocious. The calendar, though, it turns to May, and maybe he just needed a little bit of adjustment time. Maybe he needed some more Mountain Dew. Not Red Bull, Xavier, but still, we're powering him with a similar over-caffeinated drink. For May and June together, he bats .300 with a .328 on-base percentage and even manages to slug .439, which is pretty phenomenal for him, getting a couple dingers during that time. But most importantly, he is stealing 24 successful bags in 31 attempts now. The common thinking now is you want to succeed about 75% of the time to justify base stealing. While he falls off a little bit for the rest of the season, this is a really solid debut year. There's unfortunately a lot of close but no cigar moments at the end of the season for honorifics. He is a Gold Glove finalist before he loses to Juan Lagares. He finishes with 56 steals, but that is only good enough for second behind, do you want to guess who in 2014 led the league in steals? National League, I should say.
Juan Pierre.
Good guess, but not quite.
I can't think of anybody.
D. Gordon. D. Gordon shows up a lot with Billy Hamilton on the...
D. Gordon Strange.
Well, it is still D. Gordon at this time, and then it is D. Strange Gordon, yes. He also does, unfortunately, finish second in Rookie of the Year. Do you guys remember the 2014 NL Rookie of the Year?
Team
is the Mets. I will give you the Mets.
That wouldn't have been Cespedes, would it?
It would not have been Cespedes. It is DeGrom. A pretty reasonable winner over Billy Hamilton. So, finishes second in a lot of things. But, this is a year where with an OPS plus of 81, so about 20% worse than the average batter, he's still putting up 2.5 WAR. So this is if Billy Hamilton can continue to put himself in a position to display this one truly elite skill, as long as everything else is just below average and not worse than that, you've got a solid everyday ball player at worst. We've shat on the Cincinnati Reds a lot on this show, mostly because of Marge Schott, but I want to give them credit. They really try to bring the best out of Billy Hamilton to make the most of his one-dimensional skill set. We talked about the move to center field already, which is the best way in the field to really take advantage of that speed and that range. They have gotten him to start switch hitting during his time in the minors just to make sure that, if he does ever have to get in a position where he's not the everyday starter, but still wants to be a pinch runner, pinch hitter, he can be more useful in situational hitting because he can favor both sides of the plate. This offseason after 2014, they bring in Juan Pierre to work with him on bunting as a specialized instructor for him. Because again, you would think that Billy Hamilton, someone's racking up bunt singles. Not so. That is just not part of his game. He's fast and really kind of nothing else. Despite all of these efforts by the Cincinnati Reds, the 81 OPS plus that he has his rookie year is the highest he will ever have in a full season as a Major League Baseball player. The subsequent 4 years in Cincinnati, Billy Hamilton is the perfect example of the kind of guy where you want to keep saying, oh man, if he can just put it all together, and he simply can't. We just are shown time and time and again that he cannot put it all together. The steals are still there. From 2014 to 2018, he leads baseball over that full period in steals with 264, 4 straight years of 50 plus, but he never leads the league in a single season, I should mention. We also, during this time, enter the StatCast era, and you start to finally see the numbers behind exactly how bad Billy Hamilton is at hitting the ball. In the 4 years that he has in Cincinnati as a more or less everyday player in the StatCast era from 2015 to 2018, he is in the bottom 1%, the lowest possible percentile for hard hit rate, exit velocity, and expected slugging every single year. It's not an average. It's not most of them. Every year, the 3 ways that can basically measure how hard do you hit the ball say that he is among the very worst in the entire league. So for a guy that scores 43% of the time that he gets on base, it is becoming obvious now that he simply cannot get on base enough to be valuable. By 2018, that 50-game stretch that he had in May and June of 2014 started to give people real hope his rookie year that this was going to be someone. That is the single best stretch of his entire career in Cincinnati. He finishes 2018 with an OPS plus of 69. It's not particularly nice because the Reds at this point decide they have seen enough, and they try to trade him, but they can't even find any takers. And so they finally cut bait on him in November of that year. And we enter the second half of Billy Hamilton's MLB career, which is just odyssey that's going to include a stupid number of stops. In my mind, Billy Hamilton was always a Red. Like when I think of him in a Cincinnati uniform with, I should mention, incredibly large pajama pants. He was one of the worst guys for the pajama pants, and most of the pajama pants guys like Prince Fielder and David Ortiz, slightly huskier dudes. Billy Hamilton is like twigs in a pillowcase. It's insane to look at. But in my head, it is always Cincinnati.
You would think he would also be faster without the added weight of more fabric and like the wind resistance of it flapping. Like,
it seems so not aerodynamic. I couldn't agree with you more. Before we go further, I just want to get an answer out there on the record from both of you. How many total teams do you think Billy Hamilton in his career played for? And we'll get the answer at the end.
6.
5.
So 2018, he's done with the Reds. 2019, signs a 1-year deal with Kansas City, and he's waived in August, picked up by Atlanta as a free agent. 2020, he signs a minor league deal with the San Francisco Giants. He never appears with San Francisco during the COVID season, but he does play in the majors that year after a trade to the Mets. And then after the Mets cut him a month later, he is picked up by the Cubs for the final month of the season. So we've got them both there in 2020. 2021, he signs another minor league deal, this time with Cleveland, asks for his release after he once again does not make the opening day roster. So instead, he spends his season on the south side of Chicago with the White Sox in the major leagues, who 2021 were a little bit more respectable, but it does make sense as somewhere where someone like Billy Hamilton might end up nowadays. Ahead of 2022, he signs another minor league deal, this time with the Seattle Mariners, and he does opt out in June because he gets an opportunity to sign with Miami and make their major league club. He plays there for about a month and a half. After they demote him, he does elect to become a free agent, and he signs a deal with Minnesota in the minors. He does reach the majors for 7 whole plate appearances, and that's the end of his 2022 in the majors. In 2023, he signs yet another minor league deal to return to the Chicago White Sox. And he does eventually play 3 more games with the big league club for his release in August. He signs a final minor league deal that same year, 2023, with Tampa. But his 3-game appearance in Chicago White Sox, that is his final MLB appearance, which means from 2019 to 2023, he signed contracts with 11 different teams and made appearances in the major leagues with 7 of them. Both of you came up a little bit short there. And after averaging 50 stolen bases over his first 5 full years in the league, he only reaches 49 during that entire span. To bring Sliding Billy back into this for a moment, the Billy Hamiltons illustrate why I wanted to fixate on the specific skill of base running, or even just specifically base stealing, as my one-dimensional skill for this week. Because at least, sticking to the sport of baseball for a moment, a lot of other one-dimensional skills you can kind of get away with a little bit more. Like a power hitter who's just a power hitter can kind of ride that for quite a bit more, because that's all-encompassing. That is you getting on base and scoring all in one moment. If you are like an ace platoon reliever who can only get guys who bat left out, you're going to stick around for a while if you can face 3 batters and always get the ones that bat left out. If you are like a web gem defender, are always going to kind of be able to stick around as long as on that side of the field you keep producing. With base stealing, you still have to be able to get on base. No matter how good you are at base running, you cannot steal first base. I will bet any amount of money that the younger of the 2 Billies Hamilton is an immeasurably better base stealer than what Hamilton the Elder was able to do. Like, from 2013 to 2023, despite what I just described of the last 5 years there and how little he played and how little he was able to rack up, there is not a single player that stole more bases than him during that 11-year span with 326. despite basically not being in the league for 5 years. There is one person that's tied with him, a guy that played for Pittsburgh, Arizona, Miami, Oakland, and is currently a New York Met. Any quick guesses before I reveal?
Starling Marte?
Starling Marte is correct, Diaz. There we go. Starling Marte and Billy Hamilton both tied at exactly 326, but again, nobody during that span has more stolen bases than Billy Hamilton. During that same span, I also think of a guy like Terrence Gore, who's got a really similar career range. He runs from 2014 to 2022. He only plays in 112 regular season games in his entire career, but he has 2 World Series rings. And I guess I wonder what could have happened if Billy Hamilton entered as someone that people were not trying to use as an everyday player and make into an everyday player, and just from the get-go said, we are going to have this elite bench piece that we bring in for situational running because we're a team that has championship ideations, like the teams that signed Terrence Gore did. It is a huge what if, but still, he accomplished a lot, and he's not necessarily done accomplishing things. He might be in the majors, but 2023 is not the end of his pro career. I'll wrap up with that real quick. He has since gone south of the border to the Mexican League, where he initially played for Olmecas de Tabasco. He only had 2 steals with them in 11 total games, and then he eventually got cut. But he did catch on with another team in the same season, Charros de Jalisco. And during that time, he racked up 35 stolen bases in 52 games, which brings his season total for the 2024 Mexican League season to 37. And that is just enough for his first league-leading total since that 155 season that broke Vince Coleman's record. Maybe there will be other chapters for Billy Hamilton's story, but if not, I think that's a pretty perfect ending.
Go out on top of the Mexican League.
It's funny, when you first brought up Billy Hamilton, I was like, isn't he still in the league? I swear he's like a pinch running specialist somewhere. I was shocked. I think there's a good chance to be back next year. I don't know. I feel like we haven't seen the last of Billy Hamilton.
Like I said, maybe there is more of his story yet to be written, but that is the story of Billy Hamilton as it stands, and I think it's a pretty good one, if you don't mind me saying. However, it's not our only story this week, and I'm ready to hear our next one, if someone feels so bold.
So Billy Hamilton, certainly an all-time great specialist within the sport that I've chosen this week, basketball. When you think of specialists, there's a few different ways you can look at it. The most obvious is a shooter. Your Steve Kerrs of the world, your Steve Novaks. You also have the pure distributor point guard. Think of an Andre Miller or a Muggsy Bogues. We also have the rim protecting center. You can think of a Dikembe, RIP. But the most overlooked and underappreciated, in my opinion, is the rebounder. You cannot score the basketball. You cannot do anything with the basketball unless you first get the basketball. And that's where rebounding comes in. Historically, the greatest rebounder of all time, you ask most people, who are you probably going to say?
Modern era Dennis Rodman. From the people before rebounds were counted, everyone says it was Bill Russell, and I take the word of those who saw it.
Right. I think that's an accurate summation. I don't know if you would say anybody else, Xavier.
Ben Wallace, maybe? If I couldn't say Rodman?
If we were going to say people during our lifetimes, let's throw out Andre Drummond.
Andre Drummond. We'll get back to that, James. Also a very good call. But all that to say, with the 2 that you at least mentioned at the start, James, with Bill Russell and Dennis Rodman, yes, all-time prolific great rebounders. But the thing is, Bill Russell, obviously also one of the best defenders of all time. Dennis Rodman was also a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year. So I think Dennis probably ruled out. We probably can't go with the worm for this. But the guy that I want to talk about, most definitely and literally a rebounding specialist and nothing else. He never averaged more than 5.6 points per game in a season. For his career, he averaged less than 1 stock a game. He did not have a single season in which he had more assists than turnovers. But he twice averaged 11 or more rebounds a game. And I'll get into some advanced stats, some analytics, some advanced metrics. These would suggest that he is actually one of the greatest rebounders of all time. One of the most specialized specialists in the history of basketball, and my guy this week, Reggie Evans.
Reggie Evans is really up there for rebounding.
He's very up there, and we'll get into it. But that's just a little teaser. We'll come back to it, just like we'll come back to Andre Drummond. In the very beginning, Reginald Jamal Evans was born May 18th, 1980, And just as with Billy Hamilton, his minor league career took him to Pensacola. Reggie Evans was born in Pensacola, Florida.
Pensacola.
Yep.
I like
Pensacola.
Pensacola.
Pensacola, tomato. It's one of those Florida towns. In Pensacola, he had a rough upbringing. His father was in and out of prison throughout his childhood. His mom had to work different odd jobs, also relied on government assistance to be able to get by. And that was really just enough to pay the bills and make sure the lights stayed on. So with that rough upbringing, Reggie Evans did turn to selling crack for a time when he was in his teens. He and a friend would do it together. They sold for about a month before the friend got arrested, and Reggie thought, maybe I shouldn't sell drugs. Maybe I should try to look for another way forward. So he throws himself into basketball. Not only is he playing for the local high school, important in the development of Reggie Evans as a basketball player is the summer pickup games under the hot Florida sun. That's what he credits a lot of his toughness that he developed on the court. He developed a passion for the game, but as a big man, he's undersized. He's only 6'7". So despite becoming somewhat of a local legend for not just his efforts in high school, but also on the streets, he does go unrecruited. Coming out of that, he enrolls at Coffeyville Community College in Kansas, where he spends most of his first season on the bench. But in year 2, he develops into a star. He averages 22 points and 12 rebounds a game, and he's named a JUCO All-American. So with his 2 years of junior college eligibility taken up, he's now going to look for a D1 program to transfer to. And he enrolls at Iowa, where he immediately becomes the starting center and pretty quickly becomes a national force to be reckoned with. His first year at Iowa, he averages 15.1 points and 11.9 rebounds per game, which both lead Iowa. He's also the national leader in double-doubles, in free throws made and free throws attempted in his first year. Iowa goes on to win the Big Ten tournament, and they make it to the second round of the NCAA before they're knocked out by Kentucky. On the back of that, he is named as an honorable mention for the All-American team, but also he gets a chance to represent his country. The U21 FIBA World Championships were played in Saitama, Japan this year, and Reggie Evans was named as representative of Team USA. Wasn't able to access the Team USA roster on the old FIBA archives. There was not a ton available on the website, but what I can confirm is Reggie Evans does win gold, 89-80 over Croatia in the final. And Luis Scola played for Argentina in this tournament. So, it was a tournament of some repute. Reggie Evans has what Luis Scola does not, which is a gold medal at the 2001 U21 FIBA Championships. One of the most storied titles in all of basketball.
It's up there.
It's right up there. And, coming off of that momentum, he is going to come back as a senior for Iowa. And he's going to average 15.4 points with 11.1 rebounds. Iowa has a down regular season, though, so they're going to have to win the conference championship in the conference tournament if they're going to make it to the NCAA. They do make it to the conference title game, but they lose that to Ohio State, and then they unceremoniously lose in round 1 of the NIT. So Reggie's college career is done. He's again named as an honorable mention All-America. He has this experience with Team USA basketball. He's feeling pretty confident that he's going to get drafted into the NBA, even though, again, he is an undersized big man at 6'7", 6'8". Reggie goes undrafted for the draft, and he recalls that after the last name was called in the second round, he was just crying at home, being consoled by his mom. But he does get a phone call from Nate McMillan, who is the head coach of the Seattle Sonics at this time, and he gives him a training camp invite, says, look, come in, work hard, maybe you make the team. Reggie Evans, again, has that dog mentality that was formed in the hot summers playing pickup ball in Florida. And not only does Reggie Evans, as an undrafted free agent, earn a spot on the team, he earns a spot as a starter outright from camp.
I love a UFA to starter, very quick turnaround story too. Not he has to toil for a while, straight from UFA to the starting lineup. That's fucking great.
Right. And it's, again, purely just in recognition of how hard he plays on the floor, because to give you the Reggie Evans profile of a basketball player, You don't want him doing anything but rebounding. Do not dribble. Do not pass. Definitely don't shoot. Just rebound and then give the ball to the players that are better than you. But he is so impactful with that, and not necessarily skilled as a defender, but in the same way that so much of rebounding is effort, so much of defense is just effort and being annoying and getting in people's faces. So he does become a starter straight out. Starts in 60 of the 67 games that he appears in. He's more so like the fifth starter when Manu Ginobili is your sixth man type deal, because he only plays 20 minutes a game, but averages 3.2 points, 6.6 rebounds. Year 2, he doesn't start as much, but it's going into his third season that he really has a breakthrough, because he again goes to Coach McMillan and says, look, I realized that I didn't play as much last year. What do I need to do to see the court? Basically, he just told it to Reggie straight. I have enough people that can score the basketball. I want you to only focus on rebounding. If you just rebound the basketball, you're going to get your starting spot back. So he takes that personally and sets career highs in both points and rebounds as he returns to the starting lineup in year 3. He averages 4.9 points a game and 9.3 rebounds. The Sonics make the playoffs, and Reggie remains in the starting lineup, goes the full way. In round 1, they beat the Kings 4-1, and in round 2, they do take on your Spurs, James. They split the first 4 before the Spurs do what the Spurs do. They take over, and they win it in 6. Reggie's feeling pretty good because he had this breakthrough. He's starting again. They make the playoffs. It took a tough series from the Spurs to finally knock them out. But Nick McMillan is, despite making the playoffs for the first time in 3 years, released as head coach following this season. A new coach comes in, and he wants more shooting out of the power forward position. So Reggie kind of finds himself out of favor, and halfway through the season, he gets traded to Denver. Really has a resurgence with Denver. He finishes out the season averaging 5.6 points and 7.5 rebounds, but there's 2 games that I really want to take note of from the rest of that season with Denver. First of all, in March of that season, they go against the Raptors. He scores 0 points, but he pulls down 20 rebounds. The first player to do that since Dennis Rodman did it in 1997 with the Bulls. But less shining well on Reggie, and kind of more of a, I won't say dark, but not a good look for Reggie Evans was in the 2006 playoffs. The Nuggets are going against the Clippers, and Chris Kaman and Reggie Evans are battling for a rebound. You know, we always hear about when there's a fumble in football at the bottom of the pile, unspeakable, there's grabbing, there's twisting, eyes are being gouged, nuts are being grabbed, nuts are being
Busted,
cracked,
perhaps.
Nuts are being busted. And that's actually exactly what Reggie Evans does.
Oh, God.
Chris Kaman has the inside position, and Reggie Evans just reaches down under his butt, but before his penis, and gets a firm old grab of those nuts. Tries to bust them. Like, watching the video is crazy because it's like he grabs it and Chris Kaman turns around like, what the fuck was that? And then while making direct eye contact, Reggie then gives him another backhanded nut tap. Chris Kaman obviously can't stand for this, so he immediately shoves Reggie to the ground. A fight doesn't really break out where, again, important to remember in time, this is maybe 2 years post Malice at the Palace, so everybody's kind of, pins and needles, not wanting to start a fight. They end up being separated. The refs don't have replay review to be able to go to see what set this off, so they just give them offsetting technicals at the time. But video review by the league office after the fact, they fine Reggie Evans $10,000. They give him a flagrant 2 in retrospect. Really not a good play, but it did spawn a classic Inside the NBA segment. Chuck's laughing, Kenny's laughing. Shaq was still playing. So do either of you want to guess who the 4th panel member was at this time? You got Ernie, you got Kenny, you got Chuck. Doc fucking Rivers, because he was between jobs with the Magic and the Celtics.
Jesus.
Good old Doc, but yeah, a classic Inside the NBA moment. The Nuggets end up being bounced by the Clippers in that playoff run. The next season, he's again in the rotation for Denver, but starting to fall out a little bit. He's averaging 18 minutes a game, when we get to the most important part of the story for me, the part of the story where Reggie Evans gets traded to the Philadelphia 76ers. Very notably,
the
he was
part where you
traded.
pander to yourself.
This is self-pandering to the highest degree, especially when you consider that along with Reggie Evans, the Sixers also acquired in this transaction the rights to Ricky Sanchez.
Oh, fuck. That's all right. That's going to be tough for us to top today.
An incredible pool, and, you know, let it be said, in another universe, it's the Rights to Reggie Evans podcast, but the Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast, the Preeminent Sixers podcast, the only Sixers podcast, according to some people, and, you know, I include myself in some people. So both of those important players/players' rights head into Philadelphia, and Reggie quickly became a fan favorite in Philly because if you know anything about the Philadelphia fan base, you know we love unskilled bastards that work really hard and find ways to be effective. We make the playoffs this year, and we go against Detroit. This was the first year after the Iverson trade. You know, you have the Iverson era and the Embiid era. This is those in-between years. But this was an in-between year to remember, at least an in-between game one to remember. Sixers take on the Pistons, and Reggie Evans has, by my account, the game of his life. You look at the box score, and you see 11 points, you see 15 rebounds. But you really cannot encapsulate his effect in that game and the imprint he has on my memory just with those stats. First of all, you got to remember, as Xavier mentioned, Ben Wallace, one guy he's going against. He's also going against Rasheed Wallace. So one of the most formidable front courts in the history of, or at least the recent history of the NBA. And Reggie is still out there battling, pulling down 15 rebounds, jaws back and forth with Rasheed at certain points. We love that shit. But the play that I will always remember is the most no yes shot of my life. Other than, like, you know, Khalif Wyatt took some no yes shots, but at least Khalif Wyatt makes shots. The Sixers were up 2 with like about 40 seconds left. And I think it was Iguodala drove, kicks it out. It inevitably ends up with Reggie Evans at the top of the key with about 5 seconds on the shot clock. And he just fucking pulls it. And it's nothing but the bottom of the net. One of those moments that you know you're going to win. The Sixers go on to win that game 1. They lose game 2, but when they came home for game 3, Reggie Evans again has one of his career games. 9 points, 11 rebounds, and was adorned by, just as the Yankees fans chanted for Reggie Jackson, so too did the Sixers fans chant for Reggie Evans, as the Sixers took a 2-1 lead over that somewhat dynastic Pistons team. It was when they made 6 Eastern Conference Finals in a row, which is also a spoiler to say. The Sixers don't win this series. 2-1 was the peak of it. Sixers lost that series in 6, but Reggie Evans still had his moment in the sun. He ended up playing 2 seasons for us before he got traded to Toronto for another specialist of a different kind, Jason Capono, one of the most pure just three-point shooters of all time. He spends 2 years there in Toronto. He spends 1 year with the Clippers, kind of just toiling away. But now we get to his 2012-13 season with Brooklyn, which I just really need to take note of because it's a very special season for a few reasons. First of all, it's the last season for the Brooklyn Nets before they traded for Paul Pierce and KG and, kind of fucked themselves for decades. But on a personal note for Reggie Evans, he was the first player in NBA history to be fined for a flop. He flopped against the Lakers on November 21st and received a $10,000 fine. And it's no coincidence that he was the first to be fined under this system because in an article about the rule changes ahead of the season, one anonymous league executive noted that Reggie Evans was, quote, the star of the video on the instructional video that was sent around to the NBA teams to say, hey, look out for this, don't do that, this is what we're going to call. It was basically just as if you were to put together a highlight reel of the best bank shots in NBA history, it's going to be 80% Tim Duncan. This highlight tape of flopping was mostly Reggie Evans. So he earns that distinction. But beyond that, it was actually a very successful season. First of all, he sees his return to the starting lineup. He starts 56 of 80 games that he appears in and plays 24 minutes a night. The Nets go 49-33. Reggie averages just 4.5 points a game, but also averages 11.1 rebounds per game, which is impressive enough when you consider it was only 24 minutes. But when we dive into those analytics, we really can see just how impressive it was. Now, before I'm labeled a hypocrite for diving into analytics here, my biggest gripe, and I'm very consistent in this always, I say if you can't explain the statistic in one sentence or less, I have no interest in it. All the stats I'm going to reference, I can explain in one sentence or less. Rebound percentage measures the percent of a rebounds that a player pulls down out of the missed shots that are available while he is on the court. Very simple to understand, right? If every player was divided equally, the average player, they're all going to have 10%. So if we were to say defensive rebound percentage, that would then be the percent of missed shots while you're on defense. How many of those did you pull down? That's what defensive rebound percentage would be.
Okay, and so just to make sure I'm understanding it, the defensive team's defensive rebound percentage is not necessarily going to equal 100% because there's a certain number of shots that the shooting
Offensive
team
rebound
presumably also pulls down. Okay, so it's exclusively it's counting all chances while you are in a certain position if it's defensive or offensive rebounding, and otherwise just counting everybody. So all rebound percentage will equal 100, but offensive or defensive not necessarily.
Yeah, total rebound percentage, offensive rebound percentage, defensive rebound percentage. So cool. Typically the defense will rebound more than the offense. So if you were to do team averages, 75-25, it probably roughly comes out to, but everything normalizes. Of the 10 players on the court, everything normalizes to 100%. An average player, if there's 10 average players on the court, they're all going to have about 10%. For the 2012-13 season, Reggie Evans posts a 37.98% defensive rebound percentage, which is the highest for a single season in NBA history. He also posts a total rebound percentage of 26.67%, which is the second best season all time in NBA history, only surpassed by Dennis Rodman's 29.73% in the 94-95 season. Essentially, that 26.67% number, what we're saying is he is rebounding not only double what would be expected of an average player, almost triple, over 2.5 times as much as you would expect of an average rebounder to get. Again, important to remember, he's doing this in the context of only scoring 4.5 points per game for that season and not really protecting the rim. He had, I believe, 0.4 blocks and 0.2 steals per game for that season. He's
pulling the ball down and then getting it out of his hands immediately.
Giving it to the people that can actually do things. But this is an incredibly useful skill, and it's enough to power the Brooklyn Nets to the 4th seed where they take on the Chicago Bulls. The series goes 7 games. Across those 7 games, Reggie Evans averages 12.3 rebounds per game, and his defensive rebound percent is a staggering 40.8%. In Game 7, back in Brooklyn, he does score 0 points, but he pulls down 13 rebounds. He's a +7 for the game, but he's the only Brooklyn Net to be positive as the team loses 99-93 in that Game 7. Through sheer force of securing more possessions for his team, he was the only player to have a positive plus-minus in that Game 7, which just goes to show how important it is to have a dog out there and how important it is to secure that basketball, even if you can do literally nothing else. The next season is when they acquire Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce. And because of that, Kevin Garnett's going to take the starting power forward job from Reggie Evans. He finds himself on the bench. He eventually gets sent to where all players get sent to die, Sacramento, plays 2 more seasons there. He has a cameo in the Big 3, but at this point, his career is fully over in 2017. The raw numbers themselves are not particularly remarkable because if I were to pull up Reggie Evans' basketball reference, which I'm doing as I speak, played in 809 games in his career. He started 372 of them. He averaged 19 minutes a game. He averaged 7.1 rebounds a game. He averaged 4.1 points a game. More turnovers than assists, as we mentioned. 1.1 turnovers to 0.6 assists. 0.1 blocks a game, 0.7 steals. This is an extremely mediocre player who is only mediocre because he is so exceptional at rebounding while being so terrible at every other aspect of the game. To pull up some career numbers for you. For total rebound percentage all time, Reggie Evans ranks 4th with a 21.87 total rebound percentage for his career. Dennis Rodman at 23.44 is number 2. The number 1 total rebound percentage of all year, I promise you we'd come back. It is Andre Drummond, James, with 25.11% of total rebounds pulled down while he's on the court.
I'm glad I pulled that one.
It's a really good one, especially because if we look at defensive rebound percentage, Andre Drummond is also the all-time leader for that with 33.89. Reggie Evans still in the top 10 at 28.73. I just want to tear through the list because there's one name I've never heard of and then a bunch of names that I think are going to just be like, that's a guy. Sven Nader averaged 30.75% defensive rebound percentage. Never heard of him in my life before seeing the statistic. But we keep going down. Rudy Gobert is 3rd. Kevin Love is 4th. DeAndre Jordan is 5th. Dwight Howard 6th. Dennis Rodman 7th. Jonas Valanciunas 8th. And Clint Capella is 9th all time before we get to Reggie at 10th. For offensive rebound percentage all time, Reggie is also in the top 10. As we go 1 through 10, the top 10 is Dennis Rodman, Andre Drummond, Moses Malone, Larry Smith, Jeff Foster, Enos Freedom, Chris Dudley, Clint Capella, Reggie Evans, and Reggie Evans sliding in just ahead of everybody's favorite New Zealand man, Steven Adams.
Man, I forgot that Enos changed his name. Thank you for reminding me that.
It's an all-time great bit. But again, Enos was only good on that offensive end. We look at a true specialist, a true great of his one specific skill. You have Reggie Evans, and to have come from a player who was not recruited out of high school, had to toil away on the JUCO scene, goes to Iowa, becomes an All-American, leads the country in double-doubles, still doesn't get his respect, goes to Seattle, asks coach what he has to do to make the team, and he ends up turning a 12-year career out of literally just being able to rebound the basketball. And that pure desire and that pure heart. I don't think there is an example of any player in the history of basketball who is more specialized at their one skill than Reggie Evans is at rebounding. And just his story as well, coming from poverty in Pensacola, had to deal drugs to get by, had to go to JUCO, was traded along with the rights to Ricky Sanchez. It's truly an incredible story, and a story that I think could only be summed up in one word, which is Guy.
It's Guy as hell. Reggie Evans is Guy as hell. I don't know if he's going to be the most Guy today, but he can absolutely be summed up with that one word.
I just love dudes that rebound. For me, when I started, I usually played on my travel teams, you have A, B, and C. I was usually on B. And I remember asking coach, how do I get to A? And he literally pointed at Reggie Evans. He said, you do what he does, we have a spot for you on the team. And that's how I became on the A team. So though I am a shooter now in pickup, my roots as a player do go back to the Reggie Evans days.
Your days on the executive board.
Absolutely. But we do have one more member of our board. And I'm not going to be bored when he gives his presentation because we have one more, and it's from Xavier.
Thanks, Diaz. So when James first posited this topic, my thoughts immediately went to soccer and to dead ball specialists, because I love the guy who's really, really good at a set piece, and then that's their thing. So I think about James Ward-Prowse, who is he made 11 England caps. He's really good at free kicks and pretty much nothing else. I didn't even realize he got loaned to Nottingham Forest this year because West Ham didn't even really want him anymore. Obviously, he's still playing, so he can't be a guy. But there was a guy that came to mind at essentially the same time, and that is Antonio Augusto Ribeiro Reis Jr., otherwise known as Juninho Pernambucano.
Okay, so he's got all of those names, and he just makes up another one as his last name?
So the thing you have to remember about Brazil is no one gets called by their actual name. If you are a junior, you get called Juninho. And he is, again, Augusto Ribeiro Reis Jr., so
Sure.
he gets the name Juninho. And if there are two guys of the same name on a team, they give you the last name of where you're from. So, for example, Lucas Paqueta, who plays for West Ham and is also under investigation for sports betting on a massive scale, Paqueta is not his last name. He comes from the island of Paqueta, which is also known as the island of rats. And so he just has the name Lucas Paqueta because there's too many Lucases.
Lucas the Rat. That's fucking great.
And he's busted for gambling. So
what a fucking mob guy.
Maybe if he were a rat, he would get a more lenient sentence.
So Juninho, born January 30th, 1975 in Recife, Brazil. He starts off with his hometown soccer team, Sport Recife, in Brazil's Serie A. We've talked about this before. Brazilian soccer is a little weird in that there's the Serie A going down to Serie D, but each state also has their own league championship that happens earlier in the year. So there's essentially two leagues during the season. There's the state championship and then the overall Brazilian championship.
It's the same teams. It's just they exist in two organizations, right?
So the state championships are how you can qualify for the Brazilian overall pyramid and work your way up that way. So there are teams that exist in the Pernambucano League that are not in any of the Brazilian Serie A, B, C, or D because they have not qualified to get in them.
Sure, I'm saying the rosters don't change ever. You don't play with one squad.
Yes, typically, the rosters are all the same. All the same. So in 1994, he helps lead Sport Recife to the Campeonato Pernambucano title and the Copa do Nordeste title, which is the Northeastern Brazil Champions League, also known as the Lampions League, in reference to Lampião, a Northeastern Brazilian bandit and folk hero named after lamps. Juninho was an attacking midfielder, but he wasn't really the best at open play, and he didn't score a lot of goals, didn't get a lot of assists. But instead, what he was best at was his knuckleball free kicks. He scores his first free kick when he was 19 in a Serie A game against Grêmio. Quote, it was actually quite lucky. I was 19, we were 2-0 down, and I think as a team, we'd almost lost hope of getting back in the game. That's probably why I was allowed to take the free kick. I struck it with the outside of my foot from 30 yards, and their keeper made a mistake. He thought he could catch the ball, but he ended up pressing it onto the post, and it just squirmed in. So Juninho would hit the ball in such a way that there would be no spin or curl on it. Instead, it would wobble in the air, moving in different directions, making it difficult for keepers to guess which way to move to save it. It works best from very far out, which also makes it incredibly effective as fouls from 35, 40 yards out are usually not within shooting range. This technique is also called the dry leaf or folha seca in Portuguese to describe how the ball floats in the wind. He later said, I started by copying free kicks taken by Marcelinho, who played for Corinthians. He was one of my inspirations and the first player I've ever seen hit the ball head on and make it dance in the air. Didi, who won the World Cup with Brazil in 1958 and 1962, was doing it back then too. Everyone has since been tweaking the formula. In 1995, he moves to a bigger Serie A club, Vasco da Gama, where he excels over 6 seasons, becoming known as Reizinho de Colina, the Little King of the Hill. His most famous moment is during the 1998 Copa Libertadores, which is the overall South American Champions League. In the semifinals, they are away at River Plate, one of the biggest clubs in all of South America. And in the 82nd minute, he rips a massive free kick from about 40 yards out to decide it and send Vasco to the finals, where they beat Barcelona of Ecuador for their first and only ever Copa Libertadores title. In 2000, he starred in a all-Juninho midfield alongside Juninho Paulista as Vasco wins Serie A and the Copa Mercosur, and he gets the silver ball as part of the team of the season. But at this point, again, he's still in Brazil, not really on the world stage at all, but he is seeking to move to Europe. So he goes to France to play for Lyon, who had just finished second in League One, but were seeking their first ever league title. Lyon has existed since the 40s, no titles whatsoever. In his first season, he's kind of, bedding in France, but in the last game, they are down 1 point to Lens, and they are facing Lens. Juninho assists on the last goal of the game as Lyon beat Lens to win their first ever league title. The next season, Lyon repeat as champions, beating Monaco by 1 point. During the season, Juninho has 13 goals. Of the 13, 5 are from direct free kicks, including a match against Auxerre where he scored 2 free kicks. And so to give some context here on the number of free kicks that I'm going to go in for Juninho, I look back at the last 10 years of Premier League direct free kick records because that league has the best record keeping. 2014, 2015, most free kicks scored was 3. 2015, 2016, 2. 2016, 2017, 3. 2017, 2018, 2. 2018, 2019, 3. 2019, 22. So over those 6 years, the most anyone scored was 3. Then 2020, 2021, 2021, 2022 is 4, thanks to James Ward-Prowse, but no one else has more than 1. 2022-23 is 3. 2023-24, so this past year was Phil Foden had 2. No one else had more than 1. The average is about leading the league with 3 goals from direct free kicks. And right now, in his second season in Lyon, he has 5. During the 2003-2004 season, he finally makes his name on the wider European scene. Lyon, now in the Champions League, are facing Bayern Munich in the group stage. At this point, Bayern are always great, but they are very, 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 very highly thought of at this point. In net, they have Oliver Kahn, who is the best keeper in the world. Juninho scores an insane free kick against Oliver Kahn that helps Lyon qualify out of the group stage for the first time in history.
Ouais, il est bien parti! Ouais, dedans! Quel but! Quel but de Juninho à la 5e minute de cette rencontre!
Just about place perfect.
Whenever you have the goalie smack his face against the post because they're scrambling to try to get over, and the goalie hits the post and falls down, and the ball hits the post and goes in, especially from that far out, it's a beautiful, beautiful time. He also gets 4 more direct free kicks in the league as Lyon win the title for a 3rd straight season, this time by 3 points over PSG. During the 04-05 season, he scores another 13 league goals, this time good for tie for 4th in the league. Of these, he had 6 direct free kicks in the league, 1 in the French Cup, and another in the Champions League round of 16 against Werder Bremen. So 8 direct free kick goals in 1 season. And this year, they win the title for a 4th consecutive time, cruising with a 12-point gap over Lille. So, again, at this point, in 4 seasons, they have 4 titles, and this man has about 25 free kick goals. 05-06, Lyon once again win the league for a 5th straight season. Remember, they had not had a single title before Juninho shows up there. This time by 15 points over Bordeaux. A different team has finished 2nd every single time. They just keep winning. He has 8 league goals. 3 of them are free kicks. And then he also has 4 Champions League goals, all of them free kicks. 2 against Olympiacos in the group stage, home and away. 1 against Real Madrid in a 3-0 win. And 1 in the round of 16 against PSV. And this time he gets named League One Player of the Season. This man is doing things that no one has ever done at this point. The sheer number of free kicks he scored, the conversion rate for free kicks is very low. I looked it up. The conversion rate league-wide in the Premier League, because again, that has the best stats, averages to around 4% per season. Juninho, for the stats that we have, is quintuple that, if not higher. Percentages, unfortunately, aren't that consistent, but he's just ridiculous at this. He's literally the best in the world. And I don't want to beat a dead horse, but in 06-07, Juninho scores a lot of free kicks, and Lyon win League One for a 6th consecutive time, becoming the first team from a top 5 European league to win 6 titles in a row. The same thing happens the next year. Juninho, now captaining Lyon, leads the team to a 7th consecutive title. He has 8 goals, 8 assists, with 5 more free kick goals. Lyon also wins the double, winning the Coupe de France, beating PSG in the final in extra time. This is the first time that they've won both French trophies in the same season. Does anyone want to guess what happens next year?
PSG is taken over and their oil money wins the league.
So PSG does get taken over by oil money. Bordeaux wins the league this year. But Juninho scores 7 more free kicks, 5 in the league, 2 in the Champions League, including 1 against Barcelona in the round of 16. The Barcelona goal is absolutely ridiculous because it almost has a Papa Cisse-like swerve for Diaz and our Newcastle fans. It's from an angle that you do not expect someone to score a direct free kick from.
Dans la surface. Elle est fatale, il a du score. Incroyable. 1-0. Il est incroyable ce Juninho. C'est le meilleur tireur de coup franc de la planète. Oh là là.
So after this season, Juninho finally leaves Lyon with 7 titles and 100 goals, 44 of which were direct free kicks, which is an absolutely insane rate. For example, Cristiano Ronaldo, who is considered the best free kick taker of his generation for the longest time, has 800 plus goals and has less free kick goals than Juninho. Lyon also hasn't won a title since Juninho left, so in their 70-year history, their only titles came in the 8 years that he was there. Additionally, to put things in more context, at this time in France, there is no standardized ball. I don't know how they got away with this for this long, but each home team could choose the ball they wanted to use, and it was a surprise.
Are you saying they have too many balls, Xavier?
They had too many balls in France at this point. But you know what Juninho's solution was? It wasn't to say they had too many balls. It was to have Lyon buy every single ball in France so he could practice on all of them.
I appreciate the dedication to the craft.
Lyon's players would stop practicing themselves just to watch him strike a free kick. They all wanted to know how he did it, because no one else can do it. Lyon's goalkeeper Remy Vercoutreau said, quote, "I faced thousands of his shots. We'd do 30 or 40 free kicks per session, and 90% of them would be on target. And most of the time, if it was on target, it was a goal." Such as saying that if they did 40 in a session, he's scoring 30 of them, which is absolutely insane. Free kicks are not supposed to be that easy. I also have a really good graphic for the two of you on where his goals came from, because he could score from literally anywhere on the pitch.
He does always drift to the left. That's the one thing I'll say if you're saying he can score from anywhere. He do be drifting to the left every single time.
He's got ones on the right.
But I'm saying they curve to the left, though.
Fair. I'll give you that. He could score from anywhere. They just curled into different parts of the net. But after Lyon, he plays 5 more seasons between Al Gharafa in Qatar, the Red Bulls in New York, where I saw him briefly, in Vasco again. He scored at least 7 more direct free kicks with Vasco. Unfortunately, Transfermarkt does not have the Qatari League stats. On the international stage, Brazil is fucking stacked in midfield at all times, particularly the early 2000s where they won the World Cup in 2002 and the Copa America in 2004. So the guy who's really, really, really good at free kicks does not break into that squad. He does get 40 caps, which isn't insignificant, but it's not a massive amount. But he did that more he played in the 2005 Confederations Cup. So he won the Confederations Cup with Brazil that year. He scored a free kick against Euro 2004 winners Greece. In the 2006 World Cup, he scores a long-range knuckling shot against Japan, but that one was from open play. But this topic is about being great at one thing, so let's go back to talking about the free kicks. Depending on the stat you use, Juninho either scored 75 or 77 free kicks across his career. Some of the outside of Europe stats are conflicting, but it is at least one of those two numbers. Regardless of that, it is the most in soccer history that we have data for. So as of this month, Messi and Ronaldo, who are 2 and 3, have 66 and 64 respectively. And both of them have played significantly longer careers than Juninho and scored 7 to 8 times as many goals as Juninho. His free kick goals were so special that there are plenty of compilations that are Juninho top 13 ridiculous free kick goals that no one expected, that have 8 million views on YouTube. They are goals that no one should be scoring. They are from 50 yards out where no one would expect someone to shoot. And it's absolutely ridiculous the way that he makes the ball move. I'm not going to have you just take my word for this because there are plenty of other players and personalities that have the same thoughts. Thierry Henry once said, he's the best in history by miles. I've never even tried to do what Junie does because I wouldn't be able to figure it out. Which, from Thierry Henry, my favorite player of all time, someone who I think is the most talented soccer player to ever live, is ridiculous. Andrea Pirlo, one of the greatest midfielders of all time, who later stole Juninho's technique to become a better free kick taker, was not as good as Juninho, but stole the technique, said in his autobiography, during his time at Lyon, that man made the ball do some quite extraordinary things. He'd lay it on the ground, twist his body into a few strange shapes, take his run up, and score. He never got it wrong. Never. I checked out his stats and realized it couldn't just be chance. He was like an orchestra conductor who'd been assembled upside down with a baton, held by his feet instead of his hands. I studied him intently, collecting DVDs, even old photographs of games he's played. Lastly, Carl Anka of the BBC said, quote, much like King Arthur had Excalibur and William Tell his crossbow, the folk hero Juninho possessed his own special weapon to save the day, his legendary free kicks. No one hit a free kick quite like Juninho. No one. Juninho took to free kicks as if he was Robin Hood with a special selection of arrows, short-range insteps, long-range cannonballs, catapulted assists. Such was the Brazilians' prowess at dead ball situations. Defending teams were said to stop fouling once they got within 40 yards of their own goal. Today, we are talking about guys who are really, really good at one thing, and I think the greatest free kick specialist of all time, Juninho, deserves a place in the Hall of Guy.
I'm floored. I'll be honest. Here's what I'm doing right this moment. I'm checking to see whether my initial wording was only good at one thing or incredibly good at one thing. And the only reason I'm saying that is if we're looking at these three together, you've absolutely made the case that Juninho, his free kick plus, so to speak, his free kick plus compared to others taking free kicks around him, unassailable as that elite skill. The one thing put out
is he
there,
too good at other things? I know
he's on the field
yes.
a lot. Yeah, he's got to play all the time, and he does score from open field. Like, that's not a hit against him as the player, but if you look at a guy like Reggie Evans and you look at a guy like Billy Hamilton, there really aren't any other skill. And like with Juninho, while it's still all a function of taking free kicks, like sometimes he is setting up assists on those set pieces, sometimes he is scoring himself. He is absolutely perfect for this category, but I do think of the three assembled, he is perhaps the most multifaceted.
I will say when we're talking about Billy Hamilton, I had that thought in my head. Okay, is Juninho too good at other things in that he is above average at other things and then the greatest of all time at one thing?
In my rebounding analogy, he's like Dennis Rodman of free kicks.
That feels very appropriate. Yeah.
Oh, I did find it. Category is guys who are incredibly good at just one thing. So
that just is doing a lot of. It's like the well-regulated militia of this Second Amendment of
our legal framework. I'm trying to out-lawyer you is really what it is.
Yeah. So if that is the case, really good at just one thing, I will still make my argument in that Juninho was above average at things. He was not really good at anything other than free kicks, where he was arguably the greatest of all time.
Okay,
that is the thing that got him from Brazil to France and put him on the map. The things that people know about Juninho, he takes free kicks and was the best at that. So I'm not going to argue that he's not a better player than Reggie Evans and Billy Hamilton. Like that is a fact, and I'm not going to push back on that. But I will say that he was good at everything, but really, really good at one specific thing.
He was only elite at one thing.
Like I said, I think he was above average at other things. To play at Lyon, like where again there was a team that had not won anything before he got there, but ended up being a pretty good team. Like they never made it past the quarterfinals in the Champions League, so they were never one of the 10 best teams in Europe. And I don't think Juninho ever could have played for one of those because once you get to that high level, you can't kind of carry someone who's really, really good at just free kicks and not elite overall for everything. Like, same reason why James Ward-Prowse, to a lesser extent, can't even play for West Ham anymore, where it's like, we need someone who's good at other things, and we can't just rely on you to curl in a free kick or put in a corner a couple times a game. So I'll say elite free kick taker, good at everything else, but not great, not elite at everything else. But if we want to have this be crap at everything and really good at one thing, I do understand that would lead towards Billy Hamilton and Reggie Evans.
I will acknowledge that was more my thought when I came up with the category. I love your interpretation, but I'm definitely looking at Reggie Evans and Billy Hamilton. And I'll admit, when I was looking at Reggie Evans Diaz for a moment, I thought you shot yourself in the foot. Because you talked about Reggie Evans being like the exemplar of flopping. I was like, oh, well, he's good at rebounding and flopping. He's got two things. However, I do think you pointing out that he's the first person to get fined for it. If you were really good, you wouldn't get caught.
Right, exactly. And the fact that, yeah, like if you are the poster child for flopping, you can't be that good at flopping. But I guess the thing that I would also just say about that is flopping is one of those, like, anybody could become proficient or like prolific at least at flopping. The only people that are really putting time into it are people that are so bad that they have to find every little edge that they can get. So I think that was kind of the vein of Reggie going for that. Also really good at grabbing guys by the nuts from behind. He's really good at that.
On that point as well, I gotta say Reggie Evans and Juninho, both I think much harder workers than Billy Hamilton. Like, this isn't going to be me calling any athlete lazy. I don't want to follow into that tired trope. That being said, the Cincinnati Reds seem to have tried to do a lot of stuff to make Billy Hamilton better and couldn't. And maybe that's a lack of effort on Billy Hamilton's part. Maybe that really is just a further example that he truly can only do this one thing. If I can make my last push for Billy Hamilton with numbers, I decided to also crunch a couple once we started going through to see if there was like some final silver bullet I could try and find. Between his time with the Cincinnati Reds, played 690 games. Nice. He played another 261 in those final 5 years. Altogether, that's fewer than 1,000 games. Now, if we look at all of the live ball era, going back to 1920, 326 total stolen bases. That's only good enough in that span for 72nd overall. And if you sort by OPS plus during that time to find who the worst hitter of all of those 72 players with at least 326 stolen bases is, it is Billy Hamilton. He is truly, amongst his peers, the very, very worst at everything except for stealing bases. But I think I go back to what you, Diaz, said to push back on Xavier's talk about Ryan Howard being a good power hitter, and how you point out, like, Ryan Howard was an elite power hitter until he fell off. Billy Hamilton, in those 951 games, has 326 steals. Like I said, it makes him last of all the people with that many steals in the live ball era by OPS plus. He's also last in OPS plus of all the players to have done that in fewer than 1,000 games. But the thing is, he's also first of players to do that in fewer than 1,000 games, because there is no other player in the live ball era to record that many steals in fewer than 1,000 games. Like, Billy Hamilton was not just a good base stealer. He was one of the greatest base stealers of all time, who just truly could not do any of the other aspects of baseball. And you think about what would have happened if he had been able to come in 2023 with these stolen base rules. Like, Billy Hamilton would be putting Ronald Acuna's totals to shame. Like, Billy Hamilton would, if he could, and that's the sentence with him, if he could just get on base, and he can't even fucking do that. All he can do is steal bases. That's just my final pitch for Billy Hamilton. But I think between Billy Hamilton and Reggie Evans, both of those are totally deserving.
Yeah, I mean, the second that I saw Reggie was traded along with the Rice Ricky Sanchez, I was firmly planting my flag in my own backyard.
Yeah, I knew I was never going to sway you. I guess this is really like, Xavier, how do you feel about these two?
It's tough for me here because I think Billy Hamilton is a better fit, but I also think that Billy Hamilton might not be done yet. And I'm afraid about, we induct Billy Hamilton, and then next year he gets signed by the Dodgers for the playoffs as a pinch runner and has some key Dave Roberts-like moment, and we have an induction of Billy Hamilton that misses a massive moment. So I think the safer induction is Reggie Evans, even if I do like Billy Hamilton.
Okay, I'm gonna take 1 second for this whole like Billy Hamilton's not done thing. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna read off a couple guys that made the Mexican All-Star game this year.
Robinson Cano,
Neftali Felice, Jonathan Scope, Didi Gregorius, Luke Voigt. You've also got
I'm reading a lot of Yankees that I love. That's three
Yasiel
Yankees.
Puig. Well, here's the point. All of these guys, none of them are coming back. They're in the Mexican League. That's where they're going to play now. They made the All-Star game. Billy Hamilton couldn't even do that. I am a very big Billy Hamilton fan if the last couple hours have not made that clear.
I'm not saying Billy Hamilton is going to make the majors because he's a good player. I'm saying he would be signed as a pinch runner because we know MLB does that. Duke Ellis made the Yankees playoff roster despite hitting 100 in minor league ball because he could steal bases. That's the thing. If we've talked about this, no one is signing Billy Hamilton because he's good. They're signing Billy Hamilton to steal bases, and in the playoffs, teams like having a designated pinch runner like that. So I'm voting Reggie Evans because I think Billy Hamilton might play one more game in the majors at one point.
If you believe that Reggie Evans fit this category better, there's no shame in losing to that. I do think, Xavier, it's bullshit that you're going to deny Billy Hamilton on a made-up technicality that you've decided on, and that is why I will maintain a protest vote, but this is a democracy, and like I said, I have no problems losing to Reggie Evans. I just think you picked a bullshit reason to vote for him. You can just say he's a better guy. That's fine.
I mean, I could say that, but then I'd be lying to myself, and I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to lie to myself.
Then I think you've made a bad decision, but you've made a decision.
Well, listen, sometimes the ball goes up. It takes an awkward bounce or two. You really got to lock in, and you got to fight for that position. You got to fight tooth and nail. Sometimes you got to bust a nut or two, and you got to really do everything you can to secure that rebound. It's a lot like the nomination process for our illustrious Hall. And just as he did on the basketball court to a tune of 5,765 rebounds across his NBA career, Reggie Evans has again found the inside position, gone up, and wrapped both arms around it. He has secured a spot in our hall. Welcome to the Hall of Guy, Reginald Jamal Evans.
The Hall of Guy has officially acquired both Reggie Evans and the rights to Ricky Sanchez. What an absolute coup for us.
A tremendous coup. The rights to Ricky Sanchez has a lot of advertisements. I don't know if we can get some windfall down there now that we have the rights, but...
Oh, we don't have the rights to the podcast. We just have the rights to the actual individual Ricky Sanchez.
Yeah, we don't have the rights to Ricky Sanchez. We just have the rights to Ricky Sanchez. Far less valuable.
But still invaluable to us, as is your time. We are glad that you have spent that with us. That time is, as always, made possible with some people that we would like to thank. Those include producer Craig and the coders behind him. They include our musical director, Don Ham, for that lovely theme music. I'm trying to be better about remembering to mention that they come as a product of the sports reference people that make phenomenal tools for us to check all of these stats all the time. I think in particular, this was one that benefited from that. So thank you to Sports Reference as well. But most of all, thank you, dear listener, for choosing to join us this time. We sure would appreciate if you enjoy the show, you sharing it with a friend or someone else that you think would like to listen to the best sports history podcast on the internet. And you can find out about the best sports history podcast on the internet all at bit.ly/rememberthatguy, all one word, all lowercase. That's, I think, everything that I've got. But gentlemen, do you have anything else as parting words here?
Nothing for me.
Can we please not have any more injuries for the Sixers before the season starts? We have Paul George's knee. We have a fucking bruised lung.
Yeah, they've been weird ones again. It's very Sixers injuries.
Well, we went, Xavier posted in there, oh, he had a pulmonary contusion. I was like, just say bruised lung, okay? Bruised lung sounds way less fucking ominous than a pulmonary contusion. You don't need to scare me more than I'm already scared at all moments while being a Sixers fan. But the good news is that it is the year, so there's nothing to be afraid of.
This is the year, and I am one of your hosts, James.
I've been the very special guest, Xavier.
And I'm Diaz, and be sure to check out the latest PS5 spin-off. Kratos has a new adventure, Guy of War. dramatically turns page.
I will never give up on the notebook. I know that I have to take that pause every once in a while, but there's just something about writing notes by hand that I truly love.
No, it was perfectly timed, and like you could audibly the sound came through of the page flip.
Yeah.
It was great audio.
It gives me like I have to try and find good page breaks. So I have to find like, okay, and that's a good turning point.